Tony Stark was adopted. One Avengers Doomsday theory that refuses to die is the idea that Tony Stark was never Howard Stark's biological son. And oddly enough, the MCU itself may have planted the seed. In Avengers Endgame, when Tony and Steve travel back to the 1970s, Tony clearly inputs July 4th, 1970 into the time-space GPS. But here's the problem. Tony Stark's official birth date is May 29, 1970. So why is Howard Stark excitedly talking about his wife being pregnant when Tony should already be born? Tony even looks visibly confused during the scene. He brushes it off with sarcasm, but his expression says otherwise, like something doesn't quite add up. Now here's where the comics come in. In Marvel's Earth 616 comics, Tony Stark is adopted. Howard Stark's biological son, Edward Stark, dies young, and Tony is later adopted by Howard and Maria Stark. The MCU has never confirmed this, so the theory goes like this. What if the baby Howard was expecting in 1970 wasn't Tony at all? What if the child meant to be born into the Stark family was Victor Von Doom, and circumstances changed that destiny? In this scenario, Doom and Tony are parallel outcomes of the same origin. One raised by the Starks becomes Iron Man. The other, born or raised elsewhere, becomes Doom. That would explain why a multiversal Doom could arrive in Earth 616 and ask a horrifying question. Why do you have my face? Why are you Iron Man in this universe? It would also reframe Tony and Howard's strained relationship. If Tony was adopted and either knew or subconsciously sensed it, that distance suddenly makes a lot more sense. Even Tony's confusion during the endgame scene becomes retroactively meaningful. Nothing here is confirmed, but Marvel loves hiding massive reveals inside throwaway lines and uncomfortable pauses. And if Avengers Doomsday is about confronting who should have existed, then Tony Stark being adopted isn't just a twist. It's the foundation for Doom's rage. Rune King Thor. One of the most convincing Avengers Doomsday theories isn't about Doom at all. It's about Thor's endgame. The idea is simple. Avengers Doomsday transforms Thor into Rune King Thor, and Avengers Secret Wars is where his story finally ends. The groundwork for this has been hiding in plain sight since Thor Ragnarok. When Odin tells Thor, even when you had two eyes, you'd only see half the picture. It's more than a throwaway line. In Norse mythology, Odin sacrifices his eye to gain wisdom. And in Marvel Comics, Rune King Thor follows a similar path, sacrificing everything to understand the runes that govern reality itself. Odin's death isn't just emotional, it's a narrative handoff. From there, Thor's journey has been about stripping away false power. In Ragnarok, he learns that godhood comes from within. In Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, he collapses under failure and grief. Then in Thor Love and Thunder, he confronts his self-worth and redefines what it means to be a god. Not a conqueror, but a protector. Even the ending matters. Thor's daughter is literally named Love, symbolizing sacrifice, humility, and legacy, all prerequisites for ascension in the comics. Rune King Thor doesn't rise by conquering, he rises by losing everything. There's also visual foreshadowing. In Avengers Age of Ultron, Thor's vision includes the Norns, Yggdrasil, and cosmic imagery tied directly to the rune path. At the time, it felt abstract. Now it looks intentional. And if God Emperor Doom is truly the threat of Secret Wars, the Avengers will need something more than raw strength. Rune King Thor exists on a level beyond gods, a being who understands the rules of reality itself. Even Marvel's own leadership has hinted at this direction. Kevin Feige has called Thor a unique case, the only MCU character to survive multiple reinventions. Rune King Thor isn't a departure from that pattern, it's the natural conclusion. If Doomsday is about escalation, then Rune King Thor isn't fan service, he's necessity. And if Secret Wars is the end, Thor doesn't fall, he ascends. Doom is removed from Fantastic Four. One of the most haunting Avengers Doomsday theories comes from a fan-made edit that reframes Dr. Doom not as a villain who lost, but as one who was written out of existence. In the edit, a wounded Reed Richards, played by Pedro Pascal, faces Doom, who delivers a chilling line. "I was there until you decided I wasn't. You didn't defeat me, you revised reality." And that one sentence changes everything. The theory suggests that during the events of Fantastic Four, Dr. Doom was not only present but pivotal. Something went wrong, bad enough that Reed Richards made the ultimate decision. Instead of stopping Doom, he removed him from the timeline entirely. Not killed, not imprisoned, erased. That would instantly explain Doom's obsession with Reed. In this version, Doom isn't motivated by jealousy or ego alone. He's driven by the trauma of being unmade, of knowing he existed, mattered, and was then deliberately deleted by the one man who claimed to be a hero. This theory fits disturbingly well with the MCU's current direction. From Loki to No Way Home to Multiverse of Madness, Marvel has repeatedly established that rewriting reality doesn't erase consequences. People remember, timelines bleed, and beings who are removed don't always stay gone. If Doom was erased through reality revision, then Avengers Doomsday isn't about conquest, it's about retribution. Doom isn't trying to destroy the world, he's trying to restore himself and punish the man who decided he shouldn't exist. It also recontextualizes Doom as something far more dangerous than a standard MCU villain. He wouldn't just be powerful, he'd be proof that even Reed Richards can play God, and that gods make enemies when they rewrite the universe. And if Doom remembers the old reality, who else might? Trailer timestamps. One of the wildest Avengers Doomsday theories right now isn't about variants, villains, or cameos. It's about time codes. Because according to the Russo brothers, those short Avengers Doomsday trailers we've been getting, they're not actually trailers at all. They're clues. And fans think they've cracked the code. At the very end of each Doomsday teaser, just before the countdown appears, a strange sequence of numbers flashes on screen. At first glance, they look like dates. But when you look closer, they line up perfectly as timestamps. And when you apply those timestamps to Avengers Endgame, something very interesting happens. Take the Steve Rogers focused teaser. The numbers shown are 1:24:20. If you jump to exactly 1 hour, 24 minutes, and 20 seconds into Endgame, you land on a crucial moment. The Ancient One explaining branch timelines to Bruce Banner. It's the scene that establishes how messing with time doesn't fix reality. It fractures it. Then there's Thor's teaser. Its code 1:17:20 takes you to the moment where Loki shapeshifts into Captain America. A scene that's playful on the surface, but thematically tied to identity, deception, and multiversal chaos. The X-Men themed teaser pushes this even further. Its timestamp 1:11:20 lands on Rocket telling Thor that he still has something worth fighting for, that he can help save his family. It's a moment about second chances, lost worlds, and refusing to give up after failure. And finally, timestamp 1 hour 4 minutes 20 seconds points to Rocket asking Ant-Man if he wants to go to space. A small, almost throwaway moment, but one that represents the beginning of the time heist. The moment the Avengers truly commit to breaking reality to fix it. Individually, these scenes seem random, but together, they tell a very specific story. They're all moments where the Avengers justify rewriting the universe. Moments where they decide that bending reality is acceptable, as long as the outcome feels right. Which brings this theory back to Doomsday. If the Avengers have spent years correcting timelines, pruning outcomes, and deciding which realities are allowed to exist, then Avengers Doomsday may not be about stopping a villain at all. It may be about facing the consequences of those decisions. Because what happens when someone like Doom realizes they were one of the outcomes that got erased? Marvel loves hiding its future inside its past. And if these trailers really are coordinates pointing back to Endgame, then Doomsday isn't moving the story forward. It's calling the Avengers out for what they already did. And that makes this theory terrifyingly plausible. Wonder Man theory. There's a very specific reason the MCU is introducing a brand new superhero right before Avengers Doomsday. And it's not coincidence. Marvel doesn't add deep-cut characters this late in the game unless they serve a purpose. And Wonder Man may be here to make one controversial idea feel possible. Because if Victor Von Doom is going to appear wearing the face of Tony Stark, Marvel needs narrative groundwork. And Wonder Man provides it. Marvel Television's Wonder Man introduces Simon Williams, a character whose comic history quietly overlaps with Stark Industries and the idea that identity can be copied, repurposed, or stolen. In the comics, Simon runs a company that directly competes with Stark Industries, placing him in the same legacy-driven space Tony Stark once dominated. Simon gains his powers through experiments conducted by Baron Zemo, transforming his body into living ionic energy. He doesn't age, doesn't need food or air, and can reform no matter what happens to him. His identity isn't tied to a normal human body, which is exactly the kind of concept the MCU needs right now. That timing becomes even more suspicious when you look at where Wonder Man lands in the slate. He's debuting the same year as Vision Quest, following WandaVision and Agatha all along. That trilogy isn't really about magic, it's about what makes someone real. In the comics, Ultron uses Wonder Man's brain patterns to help create Vision, not his memories, his patterns. Afterward, Simon is left mentally broken, knowing part of him lives inside someone else. Later, Wanda even asks to reuse those patterns to rebuild Vision. That's the key idea. If Doom wears Tony Stark's face, the question isn't how. It's whether identity is still sacred once it becomes data. Wonder Man quietly answers that question before Doomsday ever asks it. And if Doom is about to weaponize Stark's legacy, then Wonder Man isn't a random addition. He's proof that in the MCU, faces, minds, and legacies can be reused. Once that door is open, Doom walking through it feels inevitable. Doomsday already happened. There's a growing theory that the Doomsday clock we keep seeing isn't counting toward Avengers Doomsday. Because Doomsday already happened. The key comes from the Russo brothers themselves. They've said that the Doomsday Doomsday footage released so far aren't trailers or teasers. They're stories and clues. And once you take that seriously, the countdown starts to look very different. Because what if Avengers Doomsday isn't unfolding in real time? What if we're seeing everything from Loki's point of view? At the end of Loki, Loki doesn't just save the multiverse, he becomes its anchor. Sitting at the center of all timelines, Loki can see the past, the present, and every possible future simultaneously. He exists outside linear time, much like He Who Remains once did. So if Loki can see everything at once, then the Doomsday clock isn't counting down to an event, it's counting down to finality. In this theory, Doomsday has already occurred from Loki's perspective. Doom has already won. What we're watching are the ripple effects, timelines being rewritten, pruned, adjusted, as Loki desperately tries to change the outcome before it becomes permanent. That's what the countdown represents. Not the start of Doomsday, but the last moment when reality is still editable. Once the timer hits 0, the timeline locks. No more pruning, no more revisions, no more saving the world. When Doomsday is revealed to the universe, it's already too late. The damage is set in stone, which means Avengers Doomsday isn't about stopping the apocalypse. It's about watching the last failed attempt to undo it. And if that's true, then the most terrifying part isn't Doom winning. It's that even Loki, the god of time, couldn't stop it. Loki's plan. If Avengers Doomsday is truly unwinnable head-on, then Loki's only option isn't strength, it's scale. The theory is that Loki's entire plan to stop Doom isn't to outfight him, it's to outnumber him. By the end of Loki, Loki isn't just holding the multiverse together. He becomes the god of stories, a being who understands every timeline at once. And there's a Marvel comic that may quietly reveal what that power is actually for. In the comic run Avengers Forever, we're introduced to Avenger Prime, a Loki variant whose job is to protect the multiverse itself. In that story, Loki faces Doom Supreme, a version of Dr. Doom trying to rewrite all existence in his own image. And here's the important part, they don't fight alone. Both Loki and Doom assemble multiversal armies. Loki recruits a fractured Avengers team pulled from across realities, multiple Captain Americas, including Captain Carter, an old man Logan empowered by the Phoenix Force, a cosmic Black Panther, and even the Infinity Thing, a version of the Thing made entirely from Infinity Stones. Doom Supreme responds with his own multiversal force, variants of Thanos, Killmonger, and a Doom army drawn from conquered timelines. That parallel is hard to ignore, so the theory is that Doomsday adapts this structure. Loki doesn't face Doom as a lone god at the center of the multiverse. He recruits every surviving version of the Avengers he can find, not to win cleanly, but to buy time, delay the inevitable, and challenge Doom on every front at once. It would explain why Doomsday feels less like a traditional Avengers movie and more like a collision of realities. It also fits Marvel's current direction. Fewer standalone heroes, more variants, and wars fought across timelines instead of cities. In this version of the story, Loki isn't the trickster anymore. He's the general. Doomsday isn't about one final battle, it's about whether the multiverse can survive its own last stand. It's Cap's fault. One of the strangest but most interesting Avengers Doomsday theories suggests that Dr. Doom doesn't think he's the villain at all. He thinks he's fixing a mistake. We already know that Robert Downey Jr. is returning to the MCU as Dr. Doom. And according to this theory, Doom's rage isn't random, it's personal, and it all goes back to Captain America. At the end of Avengers Endgame, Steve Rogers stays in the past to live a full life, eventually returning as an old man. On the surface, it's a perfect ending, but multiverse logic makes it messy. By staying behind, Steve creates branch timelines. And depending on how you interpret the rules, that means multiple versions of Captain America now exist across reality. Timelines overlapping, colliding, and destabilizing each other. In Marvel lore, an incursion happens when two universes occupy the same space and begin collapsing into one another, leading to total annihilation. According to this theory, Doom believes Captain America caused an incursion by disrupting the natural flow of time. And instead of seeing himself as a tyrant, Doom sees himself as the only one willing to act. In this version of the story, Doom goes back into the multiverse not to conquer, but to remove the variable. Captain America isn't a symbol of hope to him. He's a threat, a living paradox that triggered Doomsday in the first place. That reframes everything. Doom isn't angry because the Avengers failed. He's angry because they celebrated the mistake. And if Doom truly believes he's saving reality, if he thinks the Avengers are too sentimental to do what's necessary, Doomsday becomes a moral war, not a heroic one. Because what if Doom is right? What if Doomsday didn't begin with a villain, but with a hero who refused to let go? That's 14 minutes.
Thank you for watching. Like the video and don't forget to subscribe for more flops.